I think this bill is actually about voter suppression.
This bill is tweaking democracy to the profit of the party that wrote the bill.
They all are in the interests of the Conservative Party.
They persist in pushing ahead with this without anybody's support.
The opposition party is actually right to call it the Unfair Elections Act.
Is this open season on officers of Parliament?
We now see the Conservatives trying to do soft smears.
They are attacking, and they are trying to muzzle, if not dismember.
Oh, the Trudeau media team, some harsh words from those critics of the Fair Elections Act. Opposition parties say the changes, especially eliminating voting without identification, are unfair and undemocratic. But our next guest thinks that ID-less vouching system isn't necessary and it isn't safe, and that those who want to vote can find a legal way. Jerry Chippier is a Conservative lawyer, an old friend of mine, and he's testified for the Fair Elections Act. He joins us now from Calgary. Jerry, great to see you again. I can't believe the uniformity with which the media party supports this kooky idea of voting without ID, where you just get somebody to say, oh yeah, I can vouch for him. I swear that's Joe Bloggs from Main Street. And you get to vote ID free. What other jurisdiction allows no ID voting? It sounds so ripe for fraud.
You know what? I don't know of any other jurisdiction that does. It's an idea that maybe made sense 100 years ago when everyone knew each other in the community. But today, it's something that just isn't done. It's not accepted in any other country and should not be accepted in Canada.
Well, let me give you some examples, Jerry. In the province of Quebec and the province of Ontario, their provincial votes, they don't allow vouching. Can I give you one more stat? We looked at the actual rules that the Liberal and NDP parties use for their own internal votes. Here's the Liberal rules. They have a nomination going on right now in Athabasca. Let me quote from the Liberals' own rules. You must be able to prove identity and address. There are three options. Provide one original piece of identification issued by government or government agency containing your photo, your name, and your address, e.g. driver's license, or provide two original pieces of identification issued by government, educational institute, municipal office or agency, public utility, or credit card company that provides your name. They do not allow vouching in the Liberal Party. I just want to quote super quick from the NDP party too, just to prove that no one does this, Jerry, and then I'd like your review. Here's the NDP rules. This is the NDP party of Ontario, their constitution. Where an individual member's name does not appear on the membership list of a constituency association provided by the secretary of the party for the purpose of a nomination meeting, it is the responsibility of that individual member to prove that he or she resides within the constituency and that he or she otherwise has the right to vote at the nomination meeting. So the onus to prove you are who you say you are falls with the prospective voter. Jerry, why do the Liberals and the NDP refuse to allow vouching in their own parties but insist on it for our federal elections?
Well, I don't know, and I can tell you that it's not because, in fact, individuals need vouching in order to vote. I work with the United Way in Alberta, and they have a specific program for those who are homeless, those who are economically disadvantaged for whatever reason. They have a program to help people find and get ID. Because while the most important reason to have ID is to vote, that only happens every 3 or 4 years. The reality is to travel just about anywhere, on just about any kind of commercial vehicle, or to go into many bars or restaurants, to, in fact, go to school in some places, you need ID. So it's important, even for those with nothing, with no home, to have the kind of ID they need. And every province that I know of has specific programs in place to provide individuals with ID, even if they don't drive and even if they don't have any other reason to have it other than to vote.
Well, that's a great point. I mean, if you are poor, if you are on the margins of society, odds are you need interaction with some government agency. You need a health card. You need a status Indian card. You need all sorts of ID. You will probably more likely to have that ID because you're accessing these social services. I think you have a lot of ignorance by big city Liberals who don't know what it's like with real homeless people or with Indians on the Indian ban, who in their mind pretend that this is about keeping out low-income voters, but actually they love ID-free voting because they know that it's a tactic of the parties of the left. Going back to John F. Kennedy's massive win in Chicago in 1960 when all these cemeteries voted. You know, I mean, voter fraud is a tactic of the left, and I think that's in the back of the mind of the critics who want to keep this vouching wiggle room.
There's no other reason that I can think of for them to take that position, because every other reason that they've put forward is easily disputed by the facts.
Yeah. There's one more thing I want to talk about in our remaining moments. People are shocked, just shocked, that the Chief Elections Officer will no longer be able to run a Get Out the Vote campaign for specific demographic groups. Historically, the Chief Electoral Officer tries to get young people, 18, 19, 20, out to vote, who are overwhelmingly Liberal or NDP, and they don't do the same get out the vote tactics for conservative bases like farmers, ranchers, oil workers, whatever. Do you have a comment on this as well? I find it distasteful that a chief elections officer would basically do the Liberal and NDP parties get out the vote work for them using taxpayers' dollars. Again, is there any reason we should allow a chief electoral officer to pick and choose who he drives to the polls?
Absolutely not. And the reality is that the new program will allow for get out the vote efforts. It will just be done by someone who is accountable to Parliament for what's done. The real problem with what the Chief Electoral Officer has said in recent days is not so much that he's come down on one side or the other, but that he's commenting at all. Can you imagine a Parliament who has appointed an official is being told by that official that the Parliament is wrong to go in one way or the other? How can he be trusted to implement the legislation after Parliament has spoken? There is really no room for an officer of Parliament before these kinds of committees. It is not good governance, and I think he has shown that he does not have the kind of discretion that's necessary for a parliamentary officer. And as a lawyer practicing for 30 years in this area, I'm quite disappointed.
You're so right. We're out of time, but I just want to add one sentence to that. You know, you need to be a neutral implementer of elections law. And even if Mark Mayrand was right, and I don't think he is, even if he was right, the fact that he shows his opposition to one party gives the game away. He's as partisan as the rest of them. Jerry, thanks for being on the show today. We'll talk to you again soon, I hope.